is 4 o'clock, and we are going to call this meeting to order. It is May 2nd, 2016, and you're in order. If everyone who are able, would you please stand, and we'll...
Roll call first.
I'm sorry, roll call. I'll learn.
Mayor Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Hardy.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Okay, now, whoever is able or can, please stand, and we'll give the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Awards and proclamations. We do have a proclamation.
Item 3.1, the month of May 2016 is National Bike Month and Bicycle Safety Month. The week of May 16th through 20th, 2016 is Bike to Work Week, and May 20th, 2016 is Bike to Work Day in the city of Salina. Cheryl Brown will read the proclamation.
Cheryl Brown, 210 South Estates Drive. Whereas the bicycle is an economical, healthy, convenient, and environmentally sound form of transportation and an excellent tool for recreation and enjoyment of Salina's neighborhoods. Whereas throughout the month of May, the residents of Salina and its visitors will experience the joys of bicycling through educational programs, commuting events, charity events, or by getting out and going for a ride. And whereas the City of Salina recognizes the bicycle as a legitimate roadway vehicle which is entitled to legal and responsible use of all public roadway facilities in Kansas except highways constructed to interstate standards. And whereas the City of Salina, recognizing the use of bicycles as a viable mode of transportation, endeavors to promote safe and responsible bicycling and is committed to incorporating the development of bicycle facilities in its strategic plan and comprehensive plan. And whereas creating bicycle-friendly communities has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, and quality of life, to boost community spirit, to improve traffic safety, and to reduce pollution, congestion, and wear and tear on streets and roads. And whereas May has been declared National Bike Month for each of the last 60 years and is so again in 2016. And whereas the League of American Bicyclists, the Parks and Recreation Department, and other city departments and local bicycle clubs, schools, hospitals, companies, and civic groups throughout the state of Kansas will be promoting bicycling as a leisure activity as well as an environmentally friendly alternative to the automobile during the month of May 2016. And whereas the education of bicyclists and motorists as to the proper and safe operation of bicycles is important to ensure the safety and comfort of all users, now therefore be it resolved that the members of the governing body of the City of Salina hereby recognize the month of May 2016 as National Bike Month and Bicycle Safety Month, and the week of May 16th through the 20th, 2016 as Bike to Work Week, and May 20th, 2016 as Bike to Work Day in Salina. Be it further resolved that the governing body of the City of Salina urges all who support bicycling to participate in the events planned and urges all road users to share the roads safely with bicyclists.
Thank you.
You are so welcome.
Can you tell us about any activities you have?
Yes, we have a Pedal Power Festival planned for Saturday, the 14th of May. That celebration will begin at 10 a.m. in front of Ad Astra on Santa Fe. Mayor Crawford will be there to say a few words and kick off our bicycle parade. The parade will follow the anchor route south to Kansas West Lynn. We'll turn around at Kansas West Lynn and head back north and end up at the Art Warehouse on South 4th Street. That warehouse will be open from 10 to 2 o'clock that Saturday for the public, and inside there will be a large display of antique and unusual bicycles and several stations manned with very knowledgeable people who will share information about our current bicycle trails and our current and future bicycle trails and streets. Bicycle safety, what else will we have here? Basic maintenance and repair of bicycles. Then there will be representatives there of Salina area, Salina, let me get it right here, S-A-K, Salina Area Kids on Bikes. There we go. And that's a program, a national program, and we have a representative from Salina that will be there explaining that program. And a representative from Salina Parks and Recs will also be there selling helmets. So we hope that you will join us. We hope that you will bring family and friends. This is an activity for all ages.
Thank you, Cheryl. And the if for people who don't know where the art warehouse is there an address that you might want to tell people where it is?
You know, I don't know that address, but it's on the block between Iron and Walnut.
Okay, so they need to
That
come for the
On
parade so they can see right where you're going when you go back. So if they don't know where it is, you can show them.
Of course.
Right. Okay.
That will work.
Okay, I have your proclamation.
All right.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you
Cheryl.
so much.
Okay, we're on to Citizens Forum. This is an opportunity for anyone to come up and speak regarding an item that is not on the agenda. Be sure to get the person's name and address, or please leave your name and address if you want to be at Citizens Forum. If not, we'll go on to moves us on to consent agenda. Oh, okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, I believe we have something available.
Okay, Evelyn, do you want to just give your name and address for the
Yes.
clerk, please?
My name is Evelyn Maxwell, 414 East Wayne Avenue.
Mayor
in Salina.
Evelyn Maxwell.
Well, I've heard a lot in the last few days about, well, it doesn't do any good. It's rigged from the start. You can't make any difference. But I'm here to say that we can make a difference. I've seen citizens make a difference in the past. And I know that to be really effective, that we need to be in the process from the beginning and work for the general welfare of the public. And like my fellow commissioner said years ago, we need a win-win solution to any problem. Now, none of us is perfect. None of us has the whole picture. We need broad participation in community decisions. The city and county governments are here to serve the public, and I believe, and you can believe me from the contacts I've had, they really do want to serve. The major problem that we found when I was on the city commission was getting feedback from the community. Communication to and from the community. Interested in groups need an early heads up regarding what's up. And one lady whom I was speaking to, a friend regarding another issue completely unrelated to any business here, said, well, you know, I'm too busy to follow those things. So I have some suggestions that is on the mayor's copy for ways that we might be able to help our neighborhoods get more information. But I want citizens to know 5 things that they can do. 1, you can receive information of city boards and departments by using the internet at home or at the library to sign up for email notices. And you have the address there for on the internet. And if you don't have internet access, you can call the city manager's office. And he's saying, yes, you can. I believe that number is 309-5700. And you can ask to be on the mailing list for whatever concern that you want. You know, it's parks or health board or whatever. You can contact any department, that's number 2. Most phone directories list them, and they're also listed at that address on the screen. You can have your voice heard on any matter before the meetings by email, and I couldn't get that back on the website. You know, I saw it once for the commission, and I could not find it when I went back to copy it. But anyway, there is an email, and I'm sure our city manager's office would give you that address. And you can get your information in the information packet that goes to the commissioners. But if it goes by email, it'll go to them directly earlier. You can phone, email, or write Mr. Dean Andrews, who's Director of Planning, preferably by Thursday before the commission meeting, and it will be included in the packets. But packets can be pretty long, so some commissioners prefer having it earlier by email. And you can also, of course, deliver it directly to their home or by mail, if you can get it out of Wichita. I think we need a courier service, especially for the government, local government. You can request an appointment with city staff for information on what you can do and what is needed to successfully present your concerns and recommendations. If the concern is of broad interest, you really should do that. And 5th, you can read the same packet that the commissioners receive, and I think that is wonderful. You can get that online and read exactly what is sent to your commissioners before the meeting. So if there's things there that you think may not reflect the situation accurately, you can know ahead of time and come to a meeting or send another email. So the commissioners, the boards, and the city staff, I believe, and I think you've all taken a pledge, some kind of I've forgotten what you call it, an oath to serve. And you guys, I know, you really do want to hear from the citizens. And I thank you very much. Now, the mayor has another page of things that really just have to do with process that you may or may not wish to look at among yourselves.
I'll read the whole thing.
Thank you.
Spoken well by former Mayor
Thank you.
Evelyn
And
Maxwell.
I appreciate their scanning my thumb drive. So, because, you know, when you hear something, that's one thing, but when you hear it and see it, it makes so
Right.
much greater
It does.
impression.
And you're right, we do like to hear from people, and oftentimes we don't hear when we think we should.
Yes.
So thank you very much. Okay, is there anyone else for our Citizens Forum? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of April 25th, 2016. Item 6.2, authorize the purchase of a wastewater pump for wastewater collection from JCI Industries in the amount of $41,680.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion to approve the consent agenda, 6.1 and 6.2. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Moves us on to administration.
Item 7.1, second reading ordinance number 16-10830, amending and renumbering Salina Code Section 2-21 and adopting new sections 2-21 through 2-33 and sections 2-37 through 2-39 pertaining to the commission manager form of government and related future elections of the city of Salina, Kansas, repealing ordinance number 2397 and the existing Salina Code sections 2-21, 2-106 through 2-108 and 2-121.
Okay, ordinance number 16-10830 was passed on first reading on April 25th, 2016, and since that time there have been no comments received. I'll entertain a motion to adopt on second reading ordinance number 16-10830.
Madam Mayor, I move adoption on second reading ordinance number 16-10830.
Should there be public comment on this one?
Yeah, that's good.
We can take public comment. I need a second.
Second.
Okay. The motion and a second for second reading on ordinance number 16-10830. Is there any public comment? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Mayor Crawford.
Aye. Okay, moves us on to 7.2, administration.
7.2, second reading ordinance number 16-10831, amending section 42-598C of the temporary use regulations in the Salina zoning ordinance to expand the areas within the community where farmers markets may locate and operate to include churches located in any zoning district.
Okay, ordinance number 16-10831 was passed on first reading on April 25th, 2016. Since that time, no comments have been received. I'll entertain a motion to pass 10833.
I move the adoption of.
I'm sorry, 10831.
I move adoption on second reading of ordinance number 16-10831.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay. There's a motion and a second. Is there any public comment? If not, a roll call, please.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Mayor Crawford.
Aye. 7.4, please. 3. 7.4.
3.
3.
on three, okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Item 7.3, second reading ordinance number 16-10833, amending the conditions of approval applicable to a PDDU and approval of an amended development plan to allow an expansion of the Graves Family Sports Complex facilities that includes the closure and elimination of the east side of South 4th Street.
Ordinance number 16-10833 was passed on first reading on April 25th, 2016, and since that time, no comments have been received. I'll entertain a motion to pass ordinance number 16-10833.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt on second reading ordinance number 16-10833.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any public comment?
Madam Mayor. Evelyn Maxwell, 414 East Wayne. When this came before the Planning Commission, I think two of the commissioners had said, you know, shouldn't we be considering the east and the west at the same time? And because of the different aspects, it had been preferred by the Planning Commission to do them separately. However, after the first one was done, then we found out, oh, as far as Kansas Wesleyan is concerned, if they aren't both done, it's moot. You know, we have to do both or none. And so that seemed like that the process somehow didn't quite gel as well as would be expected. It was said that the Union Pacific was hard to get a hold of. I haven't found that true. Their offices and officers and different department heads have phone numbers on the internet. I was able to reach some over the weekend, and Union Pacific has said that they have no interest one way or the other as to what happens there, except they don't want anything done that's going to harm the railroad bed. And they're concerned about lighting. They were not aware that there's inadequate lighting on the 34-foot strip between the proposed fences, which I think creates another attractive nuisance for party kids, drug dealers, people who have damaged their reasoning process and or want to have fun. I would hate to have someone left on the tracks as a prank or anything else. When we have trains coming through, I think the ones that I hear are at about 11 o'clock at night, and I think I heard one about 2 o'clock in the morning one day. And so I was told by their safety engineer, let me get his name. John Simpson is who I was talking to, and he said they would require lighting along that strip, because I said there won't be any, if they close it, there's not going to be any cars going up and down there. It's going to be off campus, technically, so that the school can't control what happens in that area. And as far as upkeep and appearance, not having the fence there makes it easier to mow and so on. And my experience from talking with these gentlemen from Union Pacific, they would be very open to letting Kansas Wesleyan do some beautification there in terms of plants that don't require a lot of water. Water is one of the concerns that I have regarding the grass, because I haven't been able to find out how many gallons of grass of water it takes for that. But in our city strategic plan, we're supposed to be environmentally conscious, and this was adopted in February by you guys, and so I'm sure you're pretty familiar with that. We're supposed to be environmentally conscious, and that it's a necessity to preserve nature's assets for our future quality of life. Well, I don't know how much water that's going to take, but already we're limited as to what companies can come here, and they're also interested in economic development. But already we're limited on what companies can come here because of the scarcity of water. So, I think a beautification plan that uses some desert plants or some that don't have to be watered, would be much better plan. I think, I appreciate Kansas Wesleyan wanting to beautify that area and also have safety for their students. But I also think that the plan could be better than it is now. Better for now and better for the future. Kansas Wesleyan is going to be paying $2,000 a year to start with a 3% escalation clause. According to my calculations, and I have to recheck myself because I make mistakes sometimes, they'll be paying over $3,000 when the city updates in 2024. By the end of 25 years, they'll be paying around $10,000 a year for that. I don't know how that's going to impact the city's expense in terms of our right-of-way, but I think it'll be used to increase our rates also. And then, as Mr. Andrews can tell you, the city also has They rent from us too, so, or lease from us too. So I don't know if that completely balances out. But anyway, the rates will be going up. Let's see, there was another figure I had in mind. There's a $2 million, I think I quoted to you 1.8 million on what was that, Mr. Bangston? Do you remember? Anyway, there was a cost that I was calculating. Oh, the cost for the cars that are going to have to make a detour. Okay, at 50 cents a mile, and we've got 1,000 cars. I wish I had had time to put this on the screen for you guys. But we've got 1,000 cars a day using 4th Street. That means if it's a half a mile that the average has to go out, then that's 500 miles a day. And thank you. You can leave that up. And the dollar cost, I think it's in 25 years, is over $2 million to the citizens for car repair, so on and so forth, just using 50 cents a mile. So that's a considerable cost to the general public in terms of even a small, and I used 40 for the carbon print here. I used 40 miles per hour for the carbon thing, which is slightly different, but still part of the problem. So we've got $2 million to the general public cost, to the general public carbon dioxide emissions in 1 year. I think you'll have to flip that up a little bit. There you go. In 1 year, I think I used 15,000 miles a month. It's 53.1 tons of carbon a year that's emitted by the detour using the 40 miles per gallon figure, a small car. And most of the cars are going to be like 21 miles per gallon according to the chart that I figured it on. In addition, flip that down just another sheet, please. Okay. Another sheet, please. Okay, stop right there. Wonderful. Okay. The emissions per month is 4.25 tons. The annual emissions, as I said, is 53.1 tons. The number of trees to offset that would need to be planted to offset the carbon just from that small detour is 265.5 trees that would need to be planted every year. Kansas Wesleyan doesn't have room for that many trees. And I don't know if our parks do either. We're talking about per year to offset the carbon dioxide just from that small detour. Our strategic plan says that we're going to be cost conscious economically, and I think do I have a sheet in there that gives the cost per ton? Anyway, it's been estimated by some government guys as being $5.5 to $72 per ton of CO2 is a general cost. But then those were the government figures back in President Bush's time. Now the independent analysis, which takes in more of the social concerns, says that the true cost is more like $893 in economic damage per ton. and we're putting 53.1 ton more in the air if we close those streets. They think that in the future that cost will go up even more. And that doesn't address the health care costs. Dr. Davis has been on the health board. He's very aware that, like my neighbor across the street, there are certain days she cannot go outdoors because of her lung condition. Salina attracts a large number of older citizens from all of Kansas, and maybe even some from Nebraska, who come here for health care. And they're going to be coming to a city that has let our carbon dioxide increase. When they have lung problems, heart problems, makes it hard for them to breathe. I'm concerned about this. And for the health of the future. Now, we haven't even talked about the cost to the cognitive level of the children. We know that toxic fumes affects children's mental capacity. And these cars that are going to be putting out this extra carbon are going by 1, 2, 3, I think somebody said 4 different schools. And 2 of them are elementary schools where the students are really vulnerable. So I'm concerned. I'm for beautification. I believe we can have a better plan than we have now. The carbon people say trying to offset the carbon is very, very difficult. And they advise don't increase your carbon. They advise decrease your carbon output. And on that particular website, they have about 7 or 8, I think, other categories of things that we as a city could ask citizens to do to help decrease our carbon.
Okay, thank you.
That's a lot of information.
That's a lot of information, but thank you for bringing it to us.
There's probably other things that I haven't remembered to address at this time, but I know that the Union Pacific will be very amenable to working with you, but of course they've got a lot of track. Oh, yes. I think that there's been either a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation regarding what happens when you apply water to land next to a railroad. We don't want to soften the base there for that block for the railroad. When I was on the commission, we had a lot of hazardous waste coming through town, all of the way through town. When they found out that their track, instead of the train going straight down the track, I watched it and it went far, bent over that far, and came back because of a weak place in the track. They rerouted almost all of their hazardous waste around town. But if those tracks where the hazardous waste is going now have to be repaired, that hazardous waste has to come back through Salina. I'm making that assumption. Now, in addition to that, I saw 100 cars of military heavy equipment go down that track. I just live 3 houses from the railroad track. I saw 100 cars of heavy military equipment go down that track when we went into Iraq. I think they were going to the airport to be lifted out. And I think they brought some of it back, but I don't know how much got destroyed over there. But the word that I had when I was on the commission was the railroad doesn't like crossings of their railroad, but that the parallel street, because I asked, what about the railroad and the parallel street? They said they like that because it helps stabilize the land. And we're talking about adding water from now to eternity, God willing, to that area, which eventually is going to do something to that track. So I think that's all of the really important things that I have to present to you.
Okay. Thank
And
you,
I
Evelyn.
so dearly appreciate your attending to my concerns,
Thank
which
you.
I think is the city concerns. Oh, yes. Regarding the fire trucks and so on. If the school, middle school, has an incident, this is not regarding the fire truck, this is an incident at South Middle School. If they have an incident there, they're going to want every possible avenue to get ambulances there, police cars there, and so on, and to have the most direct street closed, I think is a mistake. I think it should be at least kept open as a fire lane and for emergency vehicles. Oh yes, and I also learned that the comparisons, other schools had closed their streets, and what I was told by a member of the planning commission is that the schools that they were comparing themselves is like comparing apples to oranges. It's not a apple to apple thing. It's like saying that 1 equals 3 because they're both prime numbers, and they're not. So back to the fire situation. I live at 414, as you know, which is right south of South Middle School. In I think it was the late 60s. The house right across the street had a fire. The high school student, she was either 9th grade or possibly a sophomore. I think she might have been 9th grade, was in the house alone that day. She had the doors locked. The neighbors, fortunately, were out in the yard and heard her call for help. By the time we got by the time the fire people got there, used their hatchets to get the door down, got their stuff put on to go down to help to bring her out, because we knew she was there. She was severely burned. I've never seen anyone burned like that. I'm a nurse. I've seen burns. I know how much people suffer with burns. She was in the hospital for about 3 months, suffering that time, just devastated her family. She died. That brings another thing. These houses are 50-year-old houses with very few exceptions. When a
Evelyn?
house changes,
I was thinking maybe we could get the staff to look at these issues with you, because we do need to get on, and I think we've had a good 5 or 10 minutes to discuss it. Would you look into it with the fire chief, Jason, and see if there's going to be any trouble with fires or with the railroad?
well, I think they have done what they felt was due diligence on that. And but my point about the electricity is that these houses are 50 years old and have not had any upgrades to their interior electrical system. Now, my house and the house across the street, those of us who stayed in our homes from the beginning, they haven't even had their outside boxes updated. And more and more of our older people are trying to save money by using heaters in the house instead of running their furnace so much. So I think that the hazards
Commissioners have
are
any questions of?
rife.
Well, if may I-
And I ask you to
Yeah, Ms.
send it
Maxwell?
back to planning, or,
No, well, I believe at last week's meeting, and it may have been the city manager, I'm not sure, but we were assured that the fire department had looked at response times, and they did not feel as though fire and ambulance and police times would be significantly impacted by closing 4th Street. But certainly, if response times change, that's something that the city would be aware of
Yeah.
and, and have to make,
Yeah.
alternative arrangements.
you know, turning that corner onto Osborne and so on, that's going to slow them down some. Response times, I think, can make a huge difference in responding to a fire, because if you've got inflammables in the house and so on, it can make a huge difference. A small amount of time can make a huge difference. So you've been very patient. You've listened attentively. I appreciate that. And I ask that you send it back to planning for a better plan.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second.
We didn't talk about economics.
Should we address?
We have a motion and a second to, pardon me?
I was just going to address some of her concerns. Some of the concerns she brought up were raised last week, and I think with time people will change their driving patterns so that other streets, 9th Street, Road Street, Ohio, will become their preferred route rather than going down 4th and just suddenly having to make a detour at the end. And I would assume that whichever architects beautified the front of Kansas Wesleyan will find something they can do along those railroad tracks. I must admit I didn't know hadn't thought about the ground being softer, but I think there are enough bright people in town who can take care of that. But we will be watching the traffic patterns, and if things need to change as far as lights and traffic flow, we have the staff that can make that happen.
Any other comments? Have a motion and a second on second reading for ordinance number 16-10833.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Mayor Crawford.
Aye. Okay, it moves us on to item 7.4.
Item 7.4, second reading ordinance number 16-10832, requesting closure and vacation of the west side of South 4th Street between Claflin Avenue and Cloud Street.
Ordinance number 16-10832 was passed on first reading on April 25th, 2016, and since that time, no comments have been received. Any public comment?
Evelyn Maxwell, 414 East Wayne. I would also say that the Union Pacific people were surprised that the application for this was filed not by an engineering company, and they have no contract regarding this.
Mr. Bankston, was there any agreement between, that you know of, between the railroad and, when we talked about this, I think a little bit last week, between the railroad and Kansas Wesleyan, as far as we know, or between the railroad and the city?
Well, certainly the modification of the agreement between the railroad and the city is something that's before you today. And as far as the arrangements with Kansas Wesleyan and the railroad, I think Mr. Scragg is probably more familiar with that, and
Yes,
defer to your thoughts on.
I've been provided a copy of the agreement between Union Pacific Railroad and Kansas Wesleyan, and I've traded emails with the point of contact with Union Pacific. So they're aware of the project, they're supportive of it. In fact, most recently we were coordinating the timing of executing your action and our agreement, so that would then precipitate them taking their final step in approving the agreement with Kansas Wesleyan. So they're aware of the project and prepared to enter into the necessary agreement with Kansas Wesleyan.
Any other comment?
Just one. I think it's very important that we be very diligent in monitoring any deleterious effects of the closure of 4th Street if it occurs, so that public safety won't be threatened, pedestrian safety won't be threatened, and the residents probably on Osborne Street be the only residents would be affected, but that we expedite any procedures that have to occur if we see that unintended consequences are occurring.
Okay. Is there a motion and a second?
I move that we adopt on second reading ordinance number 16-10832.
Second.
Have a motion and a second on ordinance number 16-10832.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Hardy.
Aye.
Mayor Crawford.
Aye. Moves us on to item 7.5.
Item 7.5, resolution number 16-7345, setting the date for public hearings to consider whether certain structures shall be condemned and ordered demolished or repaired.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We're bringing to you this evening resolution number 16-7345, and basically this resolution is merely to set the public hearing date for 5 dangerous structures that we'll be bringing forth to you. A purpose of these public hearings is, of course, to allow the owner's agent, lien holders, other parties, interested parties, occupants to appear and show cause to the Commission in the city why such structures should not be ordered to be demolished or repaired. All of the information, the photographs, the inspection reports, all of that will be presented to you at the public hearing portion. And again, the owners will be there to present their evidence as well. Again, we're just requesting that a public hearing be set. So staff recommends to adopt resolution number 16-7345, setting June 13th, 2016 as the public hearing date to consider whether or not these structures shall be condemned and ordered demolished or repaired. And I stand for any questions that you may have.
Any questions, Mr. Brown?
Thank you.
Okay. Any public comment? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to pass resolution number 16-7345.
Madam Mayor, move adoption of resolution number 16-7345, setting June 13, 2016 as the public hearing date to consider whether certain structures shall be condemned and ordered demolished or repaired.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion to approve resolution number 16-7345. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0. Move on to item 7.6.
Item 7.6, resolution number 16-7346, authorizing the mayor to execute a supplemental agreement with Union Pacific Railroad to amend the current railroad right-of-way lease agreement between the City of Salina and Union Pacific Railroad by attaching substitute exhibits depicting the area to be leased by the City of Salina.
Mike Strike.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I think I can be very brief, and if I'm too brief, you can follow up with questions. But this action item amends the map that is attached to our lease with Union Pacific Railroad to remove the areas that you've recently vacated as a result of Kansas Wesleyan's request. The only fiscal impact that we noted was the slight decrease in maintenance responsibility, since these would no longer be city streets, and we identified the typical set of 3 options for your consideration. You could pass it, you could postpone consideration, or you could choose to deny approving the resolution. Staff recommends option number 1 in light of your vacation of the roadway in response to Kansas Wesleyan's request. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions of staff?
There were no utilities running through.
By way of the plating,
the
we're
west side.
retaining the necessary easements. So there are utilities within the Union Pacific lease area, well, within some of the vacated right-of-way that we retain by plat, and then there are other utilities that are provided for by separate agreement with Union Pacific.
Any other questions?
Do we get money back for not leasing?
No, they didn't offer a discounted
Any
rate.
public comment? I'll entertain a motion to resolution number 167346, authorizing the mayor to execute a supplemental agreement with Union Pacific Railroad to amend the current railroad right-of-way lease agreement between the city of Salina and Union Pacific Railroad.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and second to pass resolution number 167346. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay, that moves us to development business.
Item 8.1, resolution number 16-7319, approving a license agreement with 104 North Santa Fe LLC to allow a private step and associated handrail in a public alleyway east of Santa Fe Avenue between Iron Avenue and Ash Street.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I think we'll just get right to the response. You continued this item at your April 18th meeting to allow staff to try to prepare a plan that addresses the concerns expressed by other property owners whose property abuts this alley. And on page 5 of your report is kind of a summary of what staff came up with, and based on your motion and your comments at the April 18th meeting, we tried to address a 3-point plan that addressed all the concerns that we heard expressed both at the Planning Commission public hearing and at your meeting. And to start with, to address the concern expressed by the building owner, 104 North Santa Fe, to have some level of protection for pedestrians accessing the rear entrance. Staff went out and did some additional measurements, and we were recommending that, as opposed to placing a bollard at the entrance to the alley, that a bollard could be placed 28 feet north of the Iron Avenue sidewalk. In other words, north of the property line between the Stromberg's property and the property owned by 104 North Santa Fe, and then placing a second bollard north of that where the parking lot connects to the alley, which is not clearly depicted on this drawing, but by placing the bollards there, that would discourage vehicles from driving down that stretch of alley, but the bollards would allow for a loading space for the Strombergs, and those bollards get lowered for snow removal, and we have had cases where a contractor was doing renovation work on buildings where Parks and Recreation staff have gone out and lowered the bollards so that a vehicle can access the rear of the building. I mean, they cannot do it on demand once a week, come out and lower the bollards, but there have been some building renovation projects downtown where the bollards have been lowered to give contractor trucks access. The other thing was discussed, working with the engineering staff. We looked at reconfiguring. Dustin, you may need to raise that up so the lower part's more visible, but we looked at reconfiguring the circulation on this parking lot so that the circulation occurred inside the the island here that has the electric boxes on it. And if you did that and changed it so it's on the inside of the island instead of the exterior in the alley, you would lose 3 stalls here, here, and here to facilitate that. So the lot presently has 28 marked stalls in it to change the circulation so that you could circulate inside the island instead of having to get into the alley and come back through that way. There's limited options of what you can do with the curb there because the electrical box is so close to the curb. So that option would involve no concrete work, but simply restriping the lot so that you could circulate and come back out and not have to go around that island. There was also discussion about modifying this curb radius right here to make it easier for people to come in and be able to turn north up that alley. Looking at that, it's not a overly desirable condition because it does put vehicle traffic in the path of the steps and handrail that was approved at the rear of the Blue Sky Brewery. So what we're recommending instead, if you could scroll to see the north lot, Dustin, there is an opening here that's 10 feet wide was put in there to help trash trucks navigate and unload from this trash enclosure here, and there's an angled stall right here. It is our recommendation that that curb cut be widened to about 16 to 18 feet. That would allow clear path to come in and park in these 2 stalls, and you could back around and head back out that direction, and that would eliminate cars having to navigate up and down this section of the alley. That would result in the loss of 1 space and the need to relocate a 3-hour parking sign. But we have discussed this with the owner of that building and their representatives, and they think that that is a favorable solution for them to be able to get in and out without having to come up through this lot and up that direction. So all of this assumes that you are favorably disposed to granting a license agreement to 104 North Santa Fe to install steps and a handrail in the alley. There would be a fiscal impact on the city. The cost of those bollards is about $1,000 a bollard to install. Again, they have locks on them, and they can be lowered because that's what Parks and Recreation does for snow removal back there. They lower the bollards and plow that alley area. And there would also be some restriping that would need to be done, some cutting of concrete, and a relocation of a parking sign in that north parking lot. So we're back to having the same 3 options that we identified. If you concur with our recommended plan, if that reflects what you were hoping to see happen, you could adopt resolution that's attached approving a license agreement with the 104 North Santa Fe LLC to allow private step and handrail in the public alleyway. Subject to any conditions you think are appropriate, you could postpone consideration of this request to allow us to do additional homework or provide you with other alternatives, or you could deny the request and provide staff with further direction. I guess that was staff's attempt at trying to take what we heard at the April 18th meeting and translate it into hopefully a situation that might satisfy all the property owners who expressed an opinion.
What, just
Any questions?
three short ones. Just trying to do the calculations on this map. The bollard is 28 feet deep in the alley, then it is south of the proposed staircase?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And is there a traffic law that prohibits someone from backing out of an alley? I know in Washington, D.C., you can't back out of an alley onto a street because, I mean, there's poor visibility if you're driving a car forward coming out of that alley. I would imagine backing out, it's
I'm not
just...
aware of one. I might defer that one to Mr. Stack, but it is not an ideal situation in any event because in order to maintain that loading space for the Strombergs, they're either going to have to back in from the street into that space from Iron, or they're going to have to head in from Iron and then back out. So from that standpoint, it is not ideal, but putting the bollard 28 feet north of Iron does preserve that loading space directly behind their building, which is 25 feet wide.
Right, and that part makes sense. I was just concerned about pedestrian safety. I didn't want to put our officer on the spot if he knew
Could you maybe
the traffic.
could you go on the aerial photos, Dustin?
He doesn't know. Okay. Backing out. Thank you.
So this is the Stromberg's building right here. It is 25 feet wide. So the bollards have to be placed in concrete, not in the brick. So what I did was measure up to the first concrete section, which is 28 feet north of Iron, and so the bollard would be placed north of the common property line between the Strombergs and 104 North Santa Fe, and then the other bollard would be placed here so that people did not come down the alley from the north.
Okay. Would there be any precedent for the person requesting from 104 to share in the cost of the bollard? Or is that something that the city customarily takes care of?
This is a little different. I think if there's any history of that with the alleys, Dean would probably know that. But some of it just simply has to do with how you want to use the alleys in the end. We may go another few years and not get a request like this, or we may get a request across the street on the other side. So it's hard to tell. Dean, are you aware of any kind of similar situation?
Well, in this particular case, in 1986, the city purchased 4x4 concrete planters and placed those at the openings to the alleys and planted. They were filled with soil, and those were ultimately acquired by the Chamber of Commerce to use as bases for Sculpture Tour Salina. And so the city replaced, at city's expense, we replaced all those planters with the bollards, but it wasn't an exact one-for-one replacement where a bollard replaced every single planter. So it was recognized, and I think, Dustin, there's a map in there that shows all the bollard locations that's in that presentation. But the focus that the Parks and Recreation Department focused on was putting the bollards to provide protection for the main pedestrian alleys. So that's what the bollards look like, and the primary focus of where they were placed was to protect people going from side streets into those pedestrian alleys. But the city manager is correct. There's a bigger picture that's beyond just this one case, and that's the bigger picture of how you want to see alleys used in the downtown area. And this may not be the last time when there's some recommendation to add a bollard in a particular location. But to date, the bollards that you see pictured here were purchased using city funds and installed by Parks and Recreation staff.
That's a good way to look at it. Thank you.
So there's no bollard right now at the north end of that block, is that correct?
This is the alley in question. The alley in question only has 2 bollards in it. And again, the bollards were placed to protect this pedestrian plaza, and those are the only 2 in the alley. Previously, before the bollard system was used, the city placed 4x4 planters at the mouth of the alley, so you couldn't even enter into the alley. This bollard allows portions of these alleys to be driven on, but you cannot drive through. And if you were coming from the north and drove up to the bollard, you would be trapped and you would have to back out.
So I was just wondering, if we have 2 bollards in that alleyway, what would prevent someone from making this mistake of driving south from Iron?
They could pull in there and they'd get as far as 28 feet and have to turn around, but I believe...
I'm talking about coming south from Iron, not going north on Walnut.
We're at Iron looking north at this point.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you were the wrong one.
I'm a block south.
You're a block south.
Yeah. Okay.
There is a aerial photo in there, Dustin, that shows all the bollard locations in the downtown. It's like the last slide. Or it could be a separate slide that's not in the slideshow, but I would think that if you were on Iron Avenue and looking north, that bollard would only be 25 feet north and it should be visible. But this is the block in question that we're talking about, and so it only has 2 bollards in it, and the bollards are there to protect this pedestrian plaza. And then here are the bollards that were placed there. Prior to that, there was a planter right here, right flush with these buildings, so that if you were looking at that alley, you wouldn't even think about driving down it, because there was a planter right there, and there was a planter right here at Ash at the entrance to that alley. And so the Parks Department moved the bollards in to provide protection at the points where they saw pedestrians coming from the side streets towards Santa Fe.
What is the proposed plan on the table now? Because this map is new to us as of this afternoon. Were we proposing to do this plan where we block off that parking from using the alleys as the turnaround?
That drawing, and I guess you can go back to the drawing we started with.
Yeah, that.
What this drawing is intended to convey is the recommendations 2 and 3 on page 5 of your report. This drawing graphically illustrates that, where this is what the parking lot looks like today north of Mr. Ravenkamp's building, and if you change the circulation so that you circulated here in front of this island, you would lose these 3 spaces. And if you went up at the north end and you widened that cut in the concrete in the northwest corner right here, you would lose 1 stall right here, but that would allow this business owner to be able to access these stalls by coming in here and backing out and heading back out.
Right, and that one I get, that the northern part of that. The south one, though, I mean, was there, as I understood it, the question is when the owners to the north with the 2 stalls off the alley, that they said they couldn't maneuver their car around that turning radius on the right there.
Right here.
Right there, yeah.
Right. So instead of changing that radius, they don't have to drive up that alley. They can pull off of 5th Street, drive straight through here, pull into their stalls. When they back out, they just back out like this and drive out.
Okay.
And they wouldn't try to use the alley to get to their stalls.
Okay.
Nor
So that turning radius, they weren't able to make that turn.
they said they had difficulty making that right turn this is how they get to the spaces today, because you come in here and you have make this right turn. When you drive up here, a vehicle is driving by the rear stairs and entrance to Blue Sky Brewery, which is not a very good situation, especially since staff told you that that alley wasn't open to traffic, and that's one of the reasons you approved the steps. So they are quite happy with this solution, which would cause, if a car is parked right here, then this opening is not wide enough for them to come in this way or to get out this way.
Okay.
But if this space is removed and this is widened, then they will never try to do this. They will come in and park here, and then they'll back the car out like this and head out.
Are we gonna need, are we gonna need to put another bollard in there south of their 2 parking stalls there? Because what if, I mean, only if, since it's wide, will people sometimes come down that and think, oh, I'll just go
Yeah.
down the alley and.
If you could scroll up, Dustin, so it, no, I guess the other way, scroll. It is possible that you may want to consider placing a bollard here to discourage people from doing just that. But that is why we said that a lot of this is focused on this application, but there's a bigger question throughout the downtown area on the level of pedestrian protection throughout our alley system.
So that leads to my next question. Thank you. Because
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Because it kind of goes back to what we're talking about long-term goal on this. So I wanted to ask, since we were talking about reconfiguring parking lots and at some point needing to do that, if these alleyways do go to pedestrian only, because quite frankly, if you do the internal turnaround in that parking lot and you put another bollard, you wouldn't even need the north bollard by 104, because if that's closed off and you're closed off up there by Blue Sky, the whole alley's shut down. If you do the internal parking on that, what is the possibility? There are two parking stalls that are there now. If this thing were to go completely, the alley say were to go completely to pedestrian, either by just making them that way, or if there's a reconfiguration of the parking lot and or at some time a parking structure there to where access wouldn't be possible to those 2 parking stalls behind the building, how would we handle that? Would we dedicate two private parking stalls to those residents to allow them to, in essence, continue? I mean, how is the ownership of those 2 parking stalls handled? Are they by virtue that they're there, or are they legally 2 parking stalls for that building?
That's a good question. I think there's really 2 ways to look at it. One is legally, and that'd be a question for Greg, as to whether or not the property owner would inherently have a legal right to have those 2 spaces or some similar option in perpetuity. I'm kind of doubting that's the case, but it might be. And the other is, let's say that that's not the case, there is no inherent right over in perpetuity to have those, then it's more of a policy item for the governing body as to whether you'd like to preserve them in some form anyway, such as reserved spaces in a parking lot. I would think that without, if you're not legally limited, I don't know that you would want to create an environment where you preserve that situation forever, but you may want to for a period of time.
Well, I'm just saying, if we make this an internal parking lot, do the curb cut there, we're in essence saying we're now giving you access across that, basically giving them an easement across the alley by creating the way for them to get there.
Well, sort of, kind of. I mean, generally speaking, unless we close an alley, it's typically open for use by an automobile.
Right,
so
and that's why I'm saying,
it's sort of there right now, but it could be looked at
if we
that
kept
way.
it, if we were to keep it open the way it is now without that new curb cut, assuming that we don't know if we're going to make them pedestrian only, at least we're not hedged in by providing what could, I think, be considered, we're providing a justifiable easement across that property for them to access.
Yeah, I'd probably defer to Greg on from the legal perspective on that.
As to the question of our obligation, or
Are we creating, if we make that, right now they're just using the alley and it's all private right-of-ways, and it may be just
Right.
by virtue that there's the space there to park off of the alley, that's why those parking
Yeah,
spaces are
You're
there.
asking that if you take action
If we
to
take
ask
action,
us to take out some of that curb to provide a direct access from the parking lot, if in essence we're sort of grandfathering, or in the future that would be sort of a grandfathered right.
you're right, are we creating an access easement to that, and to where if we reconfigure the parking lot, are we gonna have to
Yeah.
honor that? Are we gonna have to design around that
Right. One part I can answer is that there's no such thing as like a condemnation or possession in that way, or adverse possession or anything like that from a private property owner to a government entity. So from the perspective of just simply looking at the physical space, you could always change that. The question becomes, though, have you somehow, and Greg will probably get into this more, is there an inherent right in whatever action we take that would inhibit their ability to do that? Is there a taking in some fashion of the beneficial use of their property without a reasonable nexus or a public reason for that, that has public benefit to that? And that's probably I presume, the bigger question. I gave him some
Yes.
thinking time.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. As I mentioned when we spoke earlier, hearkening back to research that when the question came up, when there were, back in '86, when the downtown improvements were made, that same question came up. It's my recollection that in the first instance, we did not have an obligation to maintain access to rear parking in that C4 zone in terms of access to parking from the alley. The situation here, if I'm understanding, the concern would be the potential desire to close off parking, or close the alley to any vehicular traffic as being the ultimate objective, and whether this action would in any way impede the ability to do so in a future case. And I would want to look at that a little more closely. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I can't speak to that definitively.
I guess I have a question, and probably I should know this, but was it because of, was there a reason that step was put in there? Was it because of building code?
For Blue Sky?
No, the one that we're putting in there, or that is being put in there.
What they are requesting is that they have a situation where the entryway that you see me standing in right there is it's grandfathered, but it is non-conforming as to the building code. And it's non-conforming because the height of the step there is a little over 12 inches tall. The landing width that's there is only 7 inches, and it should be 11 inches. And the door currently pushes in, and it needs to swing out in the direction of the path of travel. So the owner is trying to address those three things by putting in a code-compliant step that where the height of the step will not exceed 7 inches, where the landing will be at least 11 inches wide, and it, by code, is required to have a handrail that protects people who step out into a public right-of-way.
That part I can see, but I guess I don't understand why the city as a whole has an obligation to spend money on those what are they called, bollards? For a tenant. It seems to me like
you do not have any obligation. This is coming to you as an application for a license agreement from the owner of 104 North Santa Fe, and they are seeking the city commission's permission to place this step and handrail in a public alley, because the alley is public right-of-way, which you oversee the use of. So it is a judgment call for you as a governing body to decide whether it's a good idea to place steps and a handrail in the alley. And we simply pointed out that about 5 buildings to the north of this, in 2012, the governing body approved a similar step and handrail behind the Blue Sky Brewery. And staff reported at the time that this alley was not open to vehicle traffic, but we've since learned that's not true, because the people who are trying to get to their 2 parking stalls behind 120 North Santa Fe drive up this alley to get to those spots.
In the configuration of the parking lot, was there any thought given to removing that barrier between the north and the south lots and perhaps opening up room for more spaces?
We have worked, Mr. Stack's group, if you could show the bottom part of that, Dustin. Mr. Stack's group has looked at, and this would be a longer term and certainly more expensive long-term solution, but long-term, if you so desired, you could make this section here an extension of the same configuration, where you would simply be taking this lot with this layout and making this an extension of that, as opposed to this current layout. This was built back in 1986. There was a building here. That building collapsed in an ice storm and was demolished, and then the city took ownership of that lot and turned it into a city parking lot around 2000. So this was done as an independent lot on top of a demolished building, and there's a sidewalk and trees and quite a barrier here. But long term, if that was the desire of the commission, you could completely reconfigure this and make it an extension of this and have it in the same configuration. We are looking at that to see if you actually get more spaces here by doing that, but there are currently 41 up here and 28 in that configuration.
Commissioners, I wouldn't recommend that right now, just related to the step. But obviously, if we are able to get star bonds and we're thinking about downtown and downtown parking, we need to look at it. And for some reason, if we don't get that, we can still look at it from a longer-term perspective if we think you can gain parking spaces. But that would be a pretty big piece just related to the step for now. In our
We were trying to keep this a lower-cost solution focused on this particular request, but certainly that's a longer-term, bigger picture item.
If we're going to just stay focused on this, could we just do the 2 bollards that are right adjacent to 104 North Santa Fe? And the curb, even though I'm not even sure it's necessary to do that curb cut to make access to the 2 parking stalls? And just do that instead of redoing that parking lot at all? Let people continue to turn around in that. I mean, I think people turn around that alley parking lot all the time in that alleyway.
I have a feeling a lot of people backing. I tried to make that left turn in a minivan. It's impossible.
Which left turn?
Come in to get into those 2 parking spaces up
I
top.
think we have a photo of that, Dustin. It's oftentimes it's a 2-point turn. You make the initial turn, you stop, you back up, and then you.
I thought about doing it. I had it down to about 5 or 6 points. Anybody who could do it in 2 is a better driver than me.
In the south parking, using the alley as a turnaround?
You know, up at the north where the cross cuts are. That's
Well,
a
yeah,
sharp.
no, I mean, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about right here, yeah.
To make this turn right here on an average vehicle, it's a
almost as
minimum
bad,
of a
yeah.
2-point. You come around, you cannot, because of this electrical box here, you come around, you stop, you back up, line yourself up,
Yeah.
and then come around.
Dean, real quick, what you just talked about there in the south parking lot, that would not have to be done in order to accommodate to the request, would it?
It would not have to be done. It's just, there was a lot of comment about how difficult that is to navigate, and so what we're simply pointing out that this is an option that can be done, but if you do that, you lose it. You don't have to pour concrete, you don't have to tear anything out, you just have to restripe this, but you lose 3 spaces.
I'd rather just say no minivan parking here.
Well, you know, I went into that south parking lot as well. Fortunately, it was a Sunday morning. Not many people were there. If it had been full, I would have tried to back out of that parking lot into Fifth Street, which is obviously dangerous. I was able to cut across empty parking spaces and go out the southern exit, but
Yeah,
that's a dangerous parking lot. I mean, as far as maneuvering your car.
Can't get around it.
we've had that, I mean, obviously, we've had that like that for a long time. Ideally, it would have been drawn out without using the alley and not as tight. So you have an option, you can try to fix that now, or we could wait and say, okay, we're going to be looking at the parking lot anyway, one way or another. We can do that piece with a longer-term look at it and just deal with that piece of curbing up on the north end and the bollards.
Considering there are going to be people from out of town parking in there once the field house gets built.
Well,
even-
we may be changing a
Well,
parking lot if there's a field house.
well,
Yeah,
I understand that, but even with people downtown, the way it is now, once you get cars all the way from the east to the west, you can't cut across to get it. You have to go into that alley.
We're
or back
turning a
out.
$2,500 project into a $25,000 project. is
No,
what
we're not
doing.
gonna do that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we want to put in 2 bollards and do a little curb cut, that's a $2,500 project. If we
Dean-
want to reconfigure and do internal turning only on that parking lot between curb cuts and painting and everything else that we're needing to change on a parking lot,
No, in the south parking lot would just be the striping, correct?
Yeah.
South parking lot, we would just change the striping so that these stripe
Right.
stalls
That's not
came
totally
out,
fine.
and you would have that for a circulation.
what are you going to do to block people from driving through?
We would not block them. I
Mhm.
think they would figure it out over time that that's the best.
Mm-hmm.
We have, this is an exception, not the rule. We have other parking lots like this in the downtown where the turnaround's in the lot and not in the alley. The fact that this turnaround is within the alley is an exception, not the rule in our downtown lots.
I think
So
it's
that's
probably
pretty
gonna-
inexpensive, that's an inexpensive option.
Well, if it's only paint, I'm fine with paint, but I mean, if we're talking,
No.
talking about redoing.
That's why we recommended that, as opposed, it would be less expensive to restripe this than it would be to go in there and physically modify this
Right.
curb.
You're going to lose about 5 or 6 parking stalls, though, I think.
Well, we've
Wow.
calculated 3.
Wow.
Four total with this plan.
It would,
And this is an à la carte menu, so you can choose any of staff's recommendations that you like and discard any that you don't like. But we took what we heard at your April 18th meeting and tried to act on that.
Jason, could we at some point, just have maybe some of us have a study session or something on the alleys in town? It just seems to me like that this particular alley just should be for pedestrians anyway.
Yeah, we
Shouldn't-
could, and what you'll have to weigh, and I don't know all the activity in the other alleys, but you will have to weigh the need to have any rear delivery, if it's occurring in any of the others. It probably isn't in most of them, maybe not all of them. So some may be easier than others, but where you do have rear delivery, you're going to weigh that versus where you're going to deliver in the front without blocking traffic. And so those are the
Right.
issues you'll weigh, but we can certainly schedule a study session sometime out this year and talk about
Well,
them.
I think all the alleys are pretty narrow.
They are.
And this one is designed with the brick inset and all it shouldn't be driven on, really, I don't think.
No, I'd say one of the more comparable parking lots to this is the one down, 7th Street, right before you get to, let's see, is it Walnut there where the
It's by the
little,
AT&T
Martinelli's
building
is?
there.
Yeah, it's really kind of just right in there, and that one circulates on its own lot. I
Yes,
believe.
you don't go into the alley, it circulates
So
within
if
the
you want
lot.
to see one that's comparable but doesn't use the alley, that's one to look at.
Yeah.
Do we need do we need the second bollard though at the north if that's not gonna be through traffic and gonna go through
I don't
there?
know why we would.
Wouldn't you only need one bollard?
Just one there
To
at
keep
the.
them coming off of Iron?
Well, otherwise, people will come down and have to back out.
Well, it's too
Once they
hard,
realize-
people won't turn down, that's too hard
They'll
to
see
turn.
that bollard.
That's a pretty difficult right-hand turn, if that's the concern. They come in.
Again,
this parking
that's a
lot.
judgment call for you. It's also a judgment call for Mr. Madison as to how much Mr. Madison has expressed a desire to try to protect the pedestrians that are going back and forth to that door. And so I think you'd want to hear from him about how important having more than one bollard would be.
Okay.
I have one more question on the steps. I like the on the blue sky step that it does not extend into the brick area. That it terminates at the brick level, at the brick area. And I was just curious, is that proposed step extending into that brick area?
It does by about 3 to 4 inches, and we pointed that out, that if you so desired, the plan, the drawings that you have in there is it's about a 23, 24-inch handrail, and if we pointed out that if you so desired, you could condition that it not extend more than 20 inches out. That would, the difference is that what's being depicted right here is between 23 and 24 inches out, and the one at Blue Sky is 20 inches out, and that's the difference between what the concrete is and the this is set back just slightly farther. The width of the alley is the same, but they've got these set in concrete and not in the brick.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to remind the commission, I'm not the applicant here. We do have
No,
Mr.
I know.
Madison, who is the
I know
applicant.
the
so.
applicant is here. Would the applicant want to come up and talk to us a little bit about that?
Good evening, I'm Nathan Madison, I represent Mr. Madison. This is now the 4th meeting I think we've had on this.
It's
I think it's
long.
about 8 months, since the initial application. With respect to the number of ballards, I don't think we have a huge issue with one if that saves some money. I do agree that I think eventually people will recognize that it's shut down. At the same time, I would also have to recognize that it would be safer to have 2, but I think that after some time, or if there was a cone set there maybe for 6 months or so, to let people notice, hey, this is shut down, then once particularly local folks get it, then probably the need for the cone isn't there anymore. Also, one of the commissioners mentioned, I believe it was the mayor actually, mentioned us having to compensate for the ballards. It sounds like that would be a pretty extraordinary step from the commission. If I heard Mr. Andrews correctly, that has not occurred before with any other ballards. This would benefit the entire city and other buildings. I just think that'd be a bit of a burden on the applicant, and also might discourage folks from taking reasonable steps to make access back there safer. Like I mentioned before, this has been now the 4th meeting. I'll just sit back, and if there's any questions for the board, happy to answer them, or if there's any responses they think it's appropriate after hearing from other concerned citizens, I'm happy to provide information.
Thank you.
Any current concern with shortening the rail from 23 to 20 inches?
No, that was, I think, a code compliance thing. We looked into that, and if I remember right, in talking to Mr. Berger, there was a suggestion we modify it to be in compliance with code, but yeah, we don't have any issue with shortening it so it doesn't extend into the brick.
Any other public comment? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, at an appropriate time, I do have a question, but
Okay.
not to.
I'm Ken Stromberg, 2732 East Shipton Road, and again, we own the building at 100 North Santa Fe. And I think with what the staff has come up with here is a a good workable solution for us. So it gives us our access so we can get to our loading and unloading in that area. The one question we had is snow removal, but it sounds like it's a non-issue as well. So as long as they can negotiate around the railing, that I don't think that's a major concern. This year was great. We didn't have much, but most years it's a lot of ice and snow back there just because it doesn't melt between the buildings. We don't have very little sun there. So I think we're okay with that. I do think the restriping of that parking lot, however, is a necessity just to make sure that the traffic can flow and not get into that alleyway and try and negotiate that. Because by closing it, we'll have more traffic through that alleyway turning around, because that's the only way to get out without backing onto Fifth Street. So I do think an internal solution would be the best solution for that parking lot.
Thank you. Mr. Bagston?
Thank you. Question, am I to understand that with the installation of the potential installation of the Ballard, that there will not be access to the two parking places unless that adaptation or cut through, if you will, is allowed?
Mr. Martins is not here because he indicated he was satisfied and pleased with the solution that staff came up with. But if you show more of the bottom, Dustin. Today, the people that use the two private parking spaces at 120 North Santa Fe come off of Fifth Street, drive through here, make a right turn, come up here, and park. When they leave, they back out, and they drive down here and exit there. They expressed at public hearings that this is a very sharp radius right here on this island, and it is difficult to make this right turn because the alley is only 10 feet wide. So one of the things that we were asked to look at was perhaps modifying, if you can go back to my curb radius, Dustin, modifying this curb radius to create a more gentle curve to facilitate that right-hand turn movement. After going out there, reviewing it, looking at costs, and doing some measurements, now you can scroll towards the top, John. There is a curb line here based on complaints received from trash pickup providers about the difficulty of accessing this trash enclosure. A 10-foot cut in that curb was made to facilitate that trash pickup. Our staff recommendation was to take that 10-foot opening and cut additional curb to make it about 16 to 18 feet wide, remove this angled parking stall right here, and with that stall removed and a slightly widened opening, it would enable the people trying to get to these stalls to enter and exit up here, and we would not have to change that curb radius down at the bottom. And that appeared to be a more cost-effective solution, and also would eliminate people driving north-south in that alley behind the Blue Sky Brewery.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I certainly understand the thought that went into that. But I would say that Commissioner Blanchard's earlier question is certainly relevant, and the discussion I've heard since as far as potential interest in eliminating what I understood to be potential interest in eliminating vehicular traffic in that alleyway. Certainly, as the city, you all are in a position to regulate the alleyway. And I guess I would simply say that by our taking measures now to facilitate vehicular access, as I say, I'm sorry I can't speak more definitively to how the rights would line up, but I would be concerned with us proceeding with that modification if you anticipate wanting to potentially eliminate vehicular traffic from that alleyway.
they might be agreeable to having reserved parking spaces. I think that was the big concern, was not having to worry about a parking space when they get to work. And that was the big, it was, I guess, a
Yeah,
selling point to them when they purchased the property.
Yeah,
Greg, would it be any different than if we just physically didn't make any changes, but said, we're going to restrict access to the alley, make it pedestrian only today, in essence, take away their legal access to the parking? Does the physical elimination of that curb really change that context at all? Is it just, or are we to the point that the real question is just simply the future elimination of access to parking, period?
Well, they're not really, when they get in their stalls, they're not in the alley, are they?
They're on private property.
They're on private.
Right.
But
the
they can
question,
only
though,
get
is
to it
if they
through the
can't get to
alley.
the parking
Yeah, right.
because of a change that you make, then it's in essence taken away, and then there becomes questions about the impact of that on the property. But that's why I was asking, does the physical removal of the curb really make any difference in the future? You still have the same issue in the future, today or the future, whenever the governing body might decide, hey, we're going to eliminate all auto traffic on the alley, period. Is it the same issue today as it would be 5 years from today, 10 years from today, absent a different?
Is your
Well,
concern that we'd be
case
creating an easement by implication or implied easement by doing that?
well, we're speaking to matters that I don't know that I want to opine on publicly, even if I precisely knew the answer. We're at that, and I'm sorry, we're at that stage where we are speaking about the city's rights relative to the private rights as to those two stalls. And I do think there's also, I'm trying to stay away from the policy aspect of the reserve parking, but I think there potentially are some legal aspects to the identification of, the city's identification of reserve parking in public lots adjoining or in the midst of a C4 zoning district.
So our issue with this is just the bollards, whether we're going to put the bollards in or not.
Well, my concern, and I'm sorry, the one thing I did misunderstand, I thought that they were accessing those spaces from,
Fifth Street.
well, from Iron, as opposed to Fifth. And that's what I was concerned about when.
I mean, in some cases, they drive up Iron all the way, but they are accessing them by driving up, some cases from Iron all the way up there, and some cases here. This is more difficult because this turn is tighter, so sometimes they drive all the way up from Iron up this alley and go up there and park.
So they can go in either way. It's just easier.
Greg,
the
would you
alley,
need,
but
do you need any prep time, or is this something to where we could, for 10 minutes?
Well, it depends on whether an opportunity to discuss it with the commission in executive session would be helpful. I was trying to determine whether or not the issues were isolated in the first instance or not, whether dealing with.
Part of Mr. Martin's concern relating to 120 North Santa Fe about the closure of the alley coming north from Iron is that they find it easier to drive from Iron straight up the alley to their spaces than they do making this turn right here. But they presently get to these spaces here because you can get them through that 10-foot opening, but if there is a car parked in this stall, you cannot get through. But there's no car parked in that stall. It's 10 feet wide, and you can get through today.
and we don't know what their lease says in there, whether or not they receive those two parking spaces through their lease with whoever owns the building or not, I suppose, so.
Well,
I mean, maybe that's,
They go together. It's part of the building.
well, that's what he said, so, I mean.
Maybe, how about just part of the painting project? Just paint that first, or that slot where the car is located, and not do the curb cut. So you still have the 10-foot opening, but you have parking restricted to south of there so they could still use that opening. Is that making sense?
It's probably easier to, if we want to use that to hit it one time by taking that curb out than to have to continue to repaint it long term. Probably would be easier to do it that way, I think.
I mean, does the curb cut necessarily set future policy? I mean, you know, we had planners at one time, they came to, you realize, got smarter and said, not as good a idea as we thought. If you know, do the curb cut for, make it safer for bicycles, I mean, it's
Commissioners, let me suggest that you go in executive session for 10 minutes for legal reasons. Shandy can get you the motion, and then that gives Greg a chance to address that point, so you can come out and we can hopefully get this addressed tonight and not have to reschedule it again.
Okay.
with the mayor's permission, maybe delay the start of the executive session until 5:50, and then come back at 6.
Okay, you want me to put that in the
Second.
form of a motion?
Okay, I read all this. Move, we go, we recess into well, be the same.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah,
guess.
same one. Move, we recess into executive session for 10 minutes, beginning at 5:50, to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in matters, and reconvene at 6 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign.
Might beat you to it.
Okay, we're back in session. Is there any other public comment about this issue?
Dagny Stromberg, 2732 East Shipton. I would just like to ask if you do allow this step, that the striping in the parking lot be fixed first and then the step be put in, because it is very difficult. I drive a truck sometimes, full-size pickup, but sometimes I drive just my Fusion, and I don't really like to make that corner of my Fusion. And one of the other ladies who parks in that parking lot said that there's that telephone, or maybe the telephone utility box or something, that was fixed just a week or two ago, and it was already knocked over the next day after it was repaired. So that does need to be fixed before the entrance that most of us use to the parking lot from Iron is closed off. Thank you.
Mr. Bankston or Mr. Andrew, is this two separate issues then? To me, that it is, but
My recommendation, Mayor and Commissioners, is that if you believe it to be two separate issues, then that enables you to address the matter of what I'll call the circumstances at the southern end of the alley, bollards and step, leaving the rest of the configuration to the north as it is in place, with the potential for some further discussion possibly as to what might occur to the north. If you believe they can only be dealt with together, then I would be concerned that as to the need for some further discussion and possibly with the owner and or tenants of the property that upon which the two parking stalls are located.
is there any other public comment? Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of, is this not on second reading? Is it? No, it's the first time. Resolution number 16-7319, providing for a license agreement with 104 North Santa Fe LLC to allow a private step and associated handrail in a public alleyway east of Santa Fe Avenue between Iron Avenue and Ash Street. And following staff suggestions, number 1 on page 5 of this particular resolution blue sheet, which would place a bollard in the alley concrete 28 feet north of the Iron Avenue sidewalk, and the second bollard 63 feet north of the Iron Avenue sidewalk. And suggestion number 2, which would allow for restriping of the south parking lot, or southernmost parking lot, between Santa Fe and 5th Streets, north of Iron.
Would,
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I was going to suggest something else, would that be more
discuss it.
appropriate now? Or?
We can discuss
Well, we
it.
can't discuss it if we don't have a second.
Well, we
Either the motion
approve.
dies.
Right.
Okay. Is the motion dead?
Motion's dead.
Okay.
Unless you're gonna let me
Got a
second it
second.
too.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll tell you.
Offer
what-
substitute
what-
motion?
Well, maybe just a little discussion with question to staff before, and that is that if we're truly looking at two different issues, one, we're looking at the license agreement for the step and being able to put in 2 bollards to protect that southern portion, as we called it, of the alley, being one item, and the other item being the alternative accesses because of parking for the northern property. I see those as clearly the two if we were to divide them into two issues, because those seem to be the two issues. So I would almost think that the motion before us on the license agreement for the STEP is a much simpler motion than getting into any of the parking areas.
If that southern portion of the alley is closed, will that impact any use of that southern parking lot at all?
That
As
won't.
far as turning
That
around?
won't, because the bollard would be, the first bollard would be 28 feet north of the sidewalk.
That would be in
And
the
then
alley,
north
right.
of that, probably another 20 to 30 feet would be the second bollard, which you wouldn't be into the parking area by then.
It
You'd
still would not be in the
You'd
parking.
still be in that south section of the alley,
South of the parking lot.
south of the parking lot.
Okay, so,
I would also be interested in reducing the width of the step from 23 inches to 20 inches. To
But
to stay
before,
within the,
Commissioners, before you make a motion that reduces the width of the step, since that's a code item, I think we need to ask Gary, I know Jim's not here, but is that door opening, the bottom of the door opening for that doorway higher in elevation compared to the alley than the one that was approved for Blue Sky? Because that dictates where you're going to end up when you have the proper run and rise of your step.
Correct. The elevations are different between the two buildings. There's not that much difference, but there is a difference between the two. The reason why the handrails so far away from the building is the fact as the door swings open, you must protect the edge of the doorway. So somebody stepping out on the step, which is only 12 inches wide, would then land on the concrete that's on the west side, the west side of the alley. But the handrail is what actually protrudes out
Okay.
past that curb.
So at Blue Sky, you didn't have a door that swung outward?
It did swing out, and that's the reason why the door must be inset more into the brick building than what this one is. That'd be
Oh.
the difference between the 20 and
Okay,
23.
their door must be inset, that's why it didn't swing out as far.
Correct, correct,
Okay, so what that means though is your railing has to be out as far as your door swing.
correct.
So you're into a whole different question if you're dealing with the building code.
but the door's going to be modified anyway, correct?
I don't know.
Not that we understand. The door was going to remain the same.
But it has to swing differently.
No, it swings out into the alleyway today.
Swings out now. Okay.
Correct. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Commissioner Blanchard, you want
It
to offer a
does go in.
substitute
Yeah,
motion
I
just for
can-
the bollards?
I'm sorry. I stand corrected. The door does push in. In order for it to be an exit door, it does need to be removed and changed to swing out.
Is there a
Well,
means-
then it could possibly be inset more, 3 more inches.
That's probably a cost item that the owner would have to look at. Is there a means to allow the handle or the railing to be far enough out, but that you wouldn't, in the design of it, you don't necessarily have to have the vertical support be underneath the very end of the railing. You could bring it back enough inches to keep it in the concrete area, couldn't you?
That would be correct.
And then
But I
also
think-
then you could keep the step on the concrete, therefore you're not digging into the concrete, cutting into the concrete.
I think that configuration may cause an ADA issue where a disabled person can't identify the railing with a cane, and they'll run into it.
Or a person on a bike at night?
Yeah, Commissioners, I think the best that we can do is ask us to try to keep the railing and the step as close as possible
Correct.
with all the codes that we have to meet, and we will certainly try to do that if we can.
Okay,
Okay.
have we discussed this?
All right, yeah, I
ad
would just,
infinitum?
and just for the record and just for the simplification of, in making the motion, I'm identifying staff recommendation number 1 as, staff recommends placing a bollard in the alley concrete 28 feet north of the Iron Avenue sidewalk. Would give the Strombergs 28-foot deep loading space. Their building is 24 feet wide. Staff recommends placing a second bollard 63 feet north. And so, in simplification of a motion, I'd just like, I'll be making reference to staff recommendation number 1 and placing 2 bollards. So, anyway, so I would move that we approve resolution adopt resolution number 16-7319 implementing staff recommendations, Plan Number 1 for the placement of 2 bollards, and approving a license agreement with the property owner to allow a private step and associated handrail in a public alleyway east of Santa Fe Avenue between Iron Avenue and Ash Streets.
Second.
With, would that include the note about the staff working on the step to keep it as close to the building as possible?
If you have consensus, you want us to try to keep it as close as possible, everybody nods their head, well, that's what we'll do.
Right.
We know it's important for us, so we will do that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve or adopt resolution number 167319. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. No. Motion passes. 4-0.
For the, Madam Mayor, if I may, for the purposes of addressing the northern portions that include the parking and access to the existing vehicular access to 120 North Santa Fe, how the best, what is the process for pursuing that?
That would have to be on application, would it? From,
I'm sorry, Mayor, Commissioner, got a habit. Could you ask the question again?
The process or what's the next step for identifying any potential changes to the parking lot and then also the existing vehicular access that the tenants at 120 North Santa Fe use?
We could look at that more closely and just bring that back to you as a future agenda item for consideration, if you'd like.
Okay.
that'd be good.
That work?
Okay.
That'd work.
That would be, and also maybe at that point, there may be a little more information as to potential parking reconfigurations in conjunction with the field house.
Well, possibly. I think those first two questions or the two locations are an easier, quicker, much quicker review than the other, unless there's already been work done on combining the parking lots. But that's a
Well,
whole
I just
drawing.
mean that further thought would be developed as to what may end
sure.
up happening there.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because we have that on our radar right now,
Okay.
particularly with the
Right,
downtown
Right.
project.
We talked
pending.
about that before,
Yep.
I think,
Okay.
at some point.
Yep.
Great.
Okay. Is there anything else? Any other business?
No?
Okay.
Just for staff's
Oops.
clarification, your motion did not include any restriping or reconfiguration of the existing parking lot?
Right, that's a separate, that's going to be a separate item.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Well, in that case,
go ahead.
I move to recess into executive session for 60 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters, and reconvene at 7:15 p.m.
Will
Second.
there be any business?
Second.
Second.
No, we do not expect any
I have a
action.
motion and a second to convene into executive session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, no other business.